The world is very different now. The world is very different now. It's very different now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daryl Heller, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the second BLM Town Hall meeting. Tonight's topic is South Bend's police accountability. We'll be talking about the idea of a citizens review board, why they're important institutions for communities to provide oversight for local police departments. Joining us in this discussion tonight as a panel that will be giving us some insights both to what civilian review boards are and more specifically discussing our proposal here in South Bend for a citizens police complaint board that will fulfill the role of a citizens review board for our city. On our panel tonight, we have Councilman Henry Davis Jr., Councilwoman Lori Hammond, and Bob Palmer, the Common Council attorney. So we're going to begin this, as we have in the past, we're going to begin this with a short poll, a very quick poll, to get a sense of what you think about civilian review boards, what you know about them, and how you feel about that idea. So if you could take a minute at the beginning here and just quickly fill out this poll, that'll give us just some quick basic information that we can use to help guide our conversation. So the poll is forthcoming. The poll is gonna come down. If you could just take a minute, review it, and then just take it quickly, that would be great. The poll results, as they're coming in, show that the question, I feel there is currently the right amount of police accountability for the South Bend Police Department. 75% of respondents disagree with that we do not currently have the right amount of police accountability in South Bend, and 25% strongly disagree that we have the current right amount of police accountability. So there seems that there is interest and need in addressing this issue here. To the question, 3 things you believe are biggest issues concerning police accountability. 75% of respondents think that gun use is one of the biggest issues concerning police accountability. 75% believe that harassment is an issue. That there's issues of measuring police success and off-duty police conduct. Both come in at 25%. And that police brutality, fully 1/2 of respondents think that is a significant issue here in South Bend. So we can see the need for this discussion is very present in our community. But one of the things that we want to make sure that we can all get on the same page, so we're talking a common language, is just talk more generally about what is a civilian review board or a community review board. Excuse me. They are titled slightly differently in different jurisdictions, in different contexts, but civilian review board, community review board, civilian oversight board, or oversight of law enforcement. Here in South Bend, our proposal is titled the Citizens Police Complaint Board. All of these are roughly referring to the same kinds of structured institutions, but there are different ways that they can be organized. So to begin, if any of our panel, if Bob or Lori or Henry would just kind of explain what is the purpose of a civilian review board to begin with. What is it and what does it do? What is it intended to do?
Unfortunately, under Indiana law, it can't do a lot. Under Indiana law, you're limited to the Board of Public Safety to discipline officers The most that a citizen review board can do is provide advisory recommendations to the Board of Public Safety.
Yeah, thank you. And can you say, any of you, or you, Bob, just what a civilian review board is? Like, what's its purpose?
The purpose is to have a group of citizens, not necessarily appointed by the mayor or the council or anyone in particular, common citizens to review actions and complaints of the police department and to give recommendations as to changes in policy or procedure, and sometimes advice on possible discipline actions.
Great. Great. Do you, Henry, or Lori, want to add to that? And also in adding, can you also say what different kinds of structures are possible for that?
I'll let Lori can go. Ladies first.
Thank you. The three types that we have seen around the country, and I think it's important that we add that in over 100 cities now around the United States, they have some form of a citizen police review board in place. There are three types. The first one is an audit or monitor type, and that is basically to examine police internal affairs investigations and the police department activity and to make recommendations. So that would be similar to what Bob was mentioning. We're restricted to of sorts within this Indiana state law. There's also a review focused model that we could follow. And that's where the civilian board examines the quality of the internal affairs investigations and again makes recommendations. And then there is a much more involved type, which would be the investigative. And the investigative, if you read through the proposal that has been put forth by Henry and myself, it is more of an investigative model where we would literally have subpoena powers to be able to look into some of the complaints that are brought forth regarding the police department.
And Lori, can you just explain the advantages and disadvantages just quickly of each of those different models? Are there ways to distinguish why one would work here or better than another?
The audit and monitor, the board tends to be all paid staff. And there are questions oftentimes with those if they're able to maintain their non-bias approach. That's been some of the conversation around that type. It is less expensive to do an audit or a review model than it is to do an investigative. But you would have to determine, number one, what's allowed through your state, and number two, what's the situation that your community is facing, and what is really the need for this particular complaint board. So you have to make that evaluation. Do you want me to keep going?
Oh, yes, sure.
Okay. A couple of the other concerns, it's really important that you get the support of the stakeholders, and those would be not only the governmental entities, but you also have to get the support of the police department and the police administration, because otherwise they can put all kinds of barriers and blocks in place to make reviewing any of the behaviors within the department very difficult. So it needs to be structured in a way that you can get as much cooperation as possible.
Great. And we have a proposal here in South Bend for a Citizens Police Complaint Board. Henry, that was sponsored by Councilman Henry Davis. Councilman Davis, can you talk a little bit about both the history, because I know that this is not the first time that you've introduced the idea of a civilian review board here in South Bend. And I do want to say that the proposal that Councilman Davis was co-sponsored by Councilwoman Lori Hammond and Councilwoman Karen White. But Councilman Davis, can you just say a little bit more about our proposal, the proposal you're presenting?
Well, and thank you guys for having this meeting. This is excellent. This is obviously an opportunity to engage a larger audience, because you would never probably get that many people down at the council meeting when stuff is happening, unless something is just really, really high energy. But what we've did, and it was a continuation from 2013. I think it was 13 or 14 a year, where a resolution was put through with a couple community partners, and those community partners were the one board was and I'm drawing a blank, and I don't know why, probably because it's late, but there was a partnership with the local NAACP branch, and also with the Interministerial Alliance, which is a group of ministers that meet on a regular basis. And so what we were doing was trying to push forward 4 different things at that time. One was mental health checks, better recruitment plan and policy within the police department, and obviously this one that we're talking about. Time has passed, and then things have changed, and so now we're right back at it. The idea, the overreaching idea, is to make sure that we have a lot more people at the table. South Bend has suffered enough as it relates to community and policing and the relationship between the two. And so it's up to us, and it's our responsibility to ensure that there is not only accountability there, but there's transparency as well. We've had a situation here recently with this Eric Logan, and I don't think anyone left out of that room after that prosecutor stopped talking was happy with the way that the information was presented, and also with the finding as well. And so we can't continue to have those type of situations or matters here in South Bend, regardless of color. Obviously, African Americans are impacted a lot more, but regardless of color, we have to make sure that there is a process that's there that is transparent. And not only is it transparent, but it allows people of the public, from the public, residents, taxpayers, citizens, to participate so that they can feel secure in our public safety officials and what they're doing.
Thank you.
Darren, this might be a good time to put up that graphic. If we could just take a look at the advantages and the kind of the reason why it's important that we as a community look at this.
Yeah, can you walk us through that, Lori?
Yeah, there are the 5 common goals of the civilian oversight. And as you think about the circumstances that we've experienced here in South Bend, you can see the value that a program like this would bring. First of all, improving public trust. We're experiencing some pretty significant issues, and have for some time. If it's the Eric Logan conversation, all the way back to the conversation around the police tapes. We've just been establishing over and over again significant mistrust within our community. And it's important that we find ways to rebuild that. Fair investigations. I've sat through several of the meetings for the Matrix, and I know that people are just very frustrated, even by seeing some of the proposed items that still remain on that matrix. And I know that that has to be a continuing conversation for us to have. So an oversight board such as this would get us closer to reaching some of our goals as a community.
You mentioned the police tapes, and so I want to direct a question to Bob. What are the boundaries and limitations according to state statute for what a civilian review board type of whatever type can do? What is the breadth of authority that it can have within Indiana law?
Actually, very little. As far as the police tapes go, They probably would not have any ability to get involved with that simply because everything on the tapes have been determined to be confidential by courts until there's a final ruling. So the review board would not be able to do anything more than the attorneys have been able to do throughout the litigation. Similarly, with the Eric Logan situation, the Civilian Review Board or Complaint Board, or whatever you want to call it, would not be able to be involved with the decision on whether to prosecute the police officer. That's a power that's limited to the prosecutor, or in this case, special prosecutor. That does not mean that there could not be a civil investigation by the review board. It just could not take on criminal connotations.
Well, what would what was the second thing you said? What would a civil investigation look like, and what breadth of authority would a civilian review board, and how can we affect through an institution like that?
It's simply not criminal. They could do their investigation, and it would be looking toward possible improvements in the process and procedures of the police department, and possible discipline action against the police officer, which at this point we couldn't do because police officer is gone. But you could look to the review board to try to work with the police department to improve procedures, recommend additional safeguards for the citizens. But again, it's under Indiana law, it has to be all advisory. It could have no real legal effect as far as determining discipline action for the officers, or even suggesting criminal prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the main goal of, I think, the Civilian Review Board is simply to open the process of the investigation and finding out what facts are there, opening it up to the public instead of having it limited to the police department or the people who attend the hearings of the Board of Public Safety.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. This might be a good time, Henry. Could you talk about the specifics of your proposal, like what it contains? Because I don't believe many people have actually seen it or had an opportunity to read it. Could you just walk us through what you're proposing?
What we are proposing is obviously the Citizens Complaint Board. The board will be made up of it'll be 9-member board. We're looking for a director also that will have some law enforcement experience to help move the board forward. We're looking for a board that's going to be encompassing and also respective of the community that it exists in. The board will obviously receive a complaint or complaints and work also in tandem. And this is our hope with the Board of Public Safety, and ensuring that there is a process, like Bob just said, that is transparent and also inclusive. So we're looking, as you know, as a council, and prayerfully that this passes through, that we have more people at the table that are going to help support the idea of better policing and friendlier policing here in South Bend, Indiana. The proposal also calls for that position of directorship, that it may end up being a paid position. I'm not sure yet. What I am envisioning at this point in this process is that once we get back going past this Corona thing, that we will have a series of community hearings, because none of this is set in stone and anything can be amended at this point. So we want people to be able to buy in into what has already been proposed, and not only buy into it, but carry the weight as we move forward in the future. I'm not always going to be down there. Lori just got started, but she's not always going to be down there, you know, meaning the rest of our lives. And so we want the community to buy into it and make sure that they grow this child into a full-grown adult that can function here in this city, and make sure that the citizens of South Bend are even happy with this particular legislative matter or item.
Can you just walk us through again in a little more detail, Henry? How would the members of this proposed board, how would they be chosen? Who would they be chosen by? Who would they report to?
Well, great question. There will be an application process I'm proposing, but we also have one pick per council person. So like I, you know, am the council member for the 2nd district. The idea is that the 2nd district will choose a person to fill that seat, and so on. So you have 1st, 2nd, 3rd, all the way down to 6th, and you have 3 at-large members.
Mm-hmm. And would that be the complete board itself? Or?
No, sir. I'm sorry. No, sir. We're also asking for some officers to participate as well. I'm sorry. And within that, we're going to have some officers as well, but there will be non-voting members. But we want them and we need them to participate. Again, we need full community buy-in. The idea is not to cut people off or put ourselves inside of a house and that'll be it. We want this complaint board to be as open and as, again, use the word again, transparent as possible, so that the community can buy in and also participate in it. So there are a number of people that will be on this board. Right there, you're looking at 12 at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be a legal advisor from the city as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
So in its current proposal, there would be 9 members of the Citizens Police Complaint Board that would be chosen by the City Council, 2 members chosen by the police chief, and 1 additional member.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And that additional member would be the advisor. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Just to clarify, the council would select all of the people, including the police officers,
Okay.
but the police chief can nominate up to 3 officers for that position, but the final decision under this proposal still belongs to the council.
Mm-hmm. Great. Jordan, there's a number of questions that have been coming up. Are there any questions that you think would be from our listeners that would be important to direct to our panel at this point?
Yeah, Bob, could you clarify the question I think Igor had raised? And it was, how does the proposal deal with state limitations and restrictions for accountability of police officers? So for police oversight, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this ordinance is modeled after the Indianapolis ordinance. When I worked with Henry and Lori and Karen in putting this together, we wanted to come as close to the edge allowed by state law as we could without going over that line. And so far, there's been no legal challenge to the Indianapolis ordinance that I can find. And it seems to be pretty broad as far as transparency and participation by citizens. So that's what we've modeled it on, trying to get as much input and transparency through the Citizens Review Board as we can. Unfortunately, under Indiana law, there's just not too many options for control. You either give control to the Board of Public Safety, which we have now, and the Board of Public Safety is appointed by the mayor, or you can go through a merit commission, but again, you have a limited number of people who would be on the merit commission, and those would be a combination of appointments from the mayor and the council, but it would be a five-member commission.
Right. And the question that just came up as you were talking, Bob, is are there any successes or any particularities about the Indianapolis model that leads to wanting to base our proposal on that?
Two reasons for that. One, it's the only viable one in the state at the moment for cities that can opt out of what the state has out there. But two, it seems to be a very viable ongoing board. I believe they meet either bi-monthly or monthly. I'm not sure which, but they do meet on a continual basis, and it really seems to be operating very well in Indianapolis. Although again, they have no power over the Board of Public Safety. They act in tandem with the Board of Public Safety to make recommendations. The Indianapolis ordinance actually comes under the Human Rights Commission in Indianapolis, which in turn comes under the mayor's office. Our proposal that's out there now comes under the Common Council instead of the mayor's office.
And for Indianapolis and proposal and what it could look like here in South Bend, what would the relationship with the Board of Public Safety be, or what are the possibilities or that range?
I would hope that the Board of Public Safety would view the Citizens Review Board as a team member to be able to offer a different perspective than what the Board of Public Safety is used to. But I think more importantly, it would open up the transparency to the citizens at large and develop more trust between the citizens and the police department, because there would be another buffer between the citizens and the Board of Public Safety.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of goes back to what you were presenting, Lori, earlier, in the 5 reasons that this establishing a deeper sense of community trust is one important outcome.
Right. It gives us another layer of accountability. It gives the entire process a lot more transparency. And the thing that's important for everyone to realize, even with a review board like this, they may at times find the same outcome as the internal review board of the police department. There's no guarantee that it will every time overturn a decision, but it is intended to give the community a sense that it was done fairly and justly. That's been the problem, is that there just doesn't seem to be the fairness in place that people are looking for and expecting from this department.
Great.
Can I chime in real quick, Daryl?
Yes, please.
So Veronica asked kind of a follow-up to what Bob was talking about and Lori. So she asked, there is usually a great wall of silence surrounding policing and disciplinary actions. Have the police in South Bend been open to the idea and stated their willingness to work with the Civilian Review Board?
Go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, look, we ran into a wall just like everybody else during this process when the Corona thing became real to us. So we haven't been able to, and I haven't reached out any further than filing the bill that day. And it's been filed for, I think, over last probably maybe month at this point, because I don't know when we're going to get back to work. I don't know when we were going to be allowed to even have these discussions. As time goes on, obviously there will be, opportunity to speak with the officers in the mayor's office about this particular legislative item. But right now, and as it stands over the last few weeks, we've just been dealing with the Corona thing. And we've really have slowed down a lot on a lot of council business, but they will absolutely be included in the conversation very, very soon.
There is another piece of the proposed ordinance that I think adds a bit of credibility on both sides. And the voting members are asked to do 12 hours a year of ride-alongs with the police officers, so that it dispenses of any concept that the people, the voting members on this board, really don't know what a police day is like. So, and that's one of the things I found most interesting about the ordinance when Henry asked me to get on board with this, is that it really tries to expose both sides to issues that each are facing. So the voting members get a glimpse into some of the realities of being in that police vehicle. And then there are also ethics guidelines and those types of things for any of the police nominated members that would be non-voting, but it holds them to a certain level of ethical expectation as well. So it does address both of those pieces. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, no, and if I'm not mistaken, the police recommended members would also have to serve have been on the force a certain amount of years as well, and have a certain amount of experience before.
7 years, I think is, yeah, I think 7
Correct.
years. What's
Correct.
identifying, yeah.
Hey,
You know,
Daryl.
we
Yes.
do have a certain degree of urgency with this, because it may be something, if it gets passed, we have to include in the collective bargaining agreement with the police department, or at least make reference to in that collective bargaining agreement. And that's up for negotiation at the end of this summer. So there is some urgency to try to get this in place so we know what we have to do with the union.
So are you suggesting that if it doesn't get in place, then it'll be harder to have those kinds of conversations or to fold it into the agreement with the police union?
I think it would be more difficult to do it in a theoretical sense without a firm document, but at least if we have a very good working outline or a working model, this by no means, I think, is a finished product. I think Councilman Davis and Councilwoman Hammond wanted to put something out there for the community to respond to. There has to be a first step. And the first step is getting something in writing for the people to look at. So if we can at least get it far enough that the parameters will be sufficiently stated, I think we can go to the police union and negotiate in good faith with that.
Mm-hmm.
The farther along we are, the easier it will be to do that, though.
Right.
Bob, doesn't it also call for a 30-day public comment period?
Yes.
Hey, I just want to, sorry, this is Jordan again. I just want to leave room for people who are submitting questions on Facebook.
Yeah, please, Jordan.
In the comment section. So there was a question raised. This is from Clara Ross. She says, my question is, who will have access to the police disciplinary files? She believes that that's real transparency. And says the public is the employer, are we not?
Anyone?
That's a difficult question, because internal affairs files are generally confidential. Personnel files are generally confidential. We will have, that's part of the reason why we'll have to get this included in the collective bargaining agreement. We have to be able to get agreements that those items can be seen by the review board.
Bob, are those things that would have to be subpoenaed? I know there's subpoena powers mentioned in the ordinance.
Probably, because those are the types of documents that are not voluntarily turned over for the protection of everybody involved, both the employer and the police officer. You know, the city would not want to be sued by a police officer for turning something over voluntarily that was confidential. So if you have a subpoena, which is in effect a court order, then everyone is protected.
Just related to that, would the Civilian Police Complaint Board have authority on par with the Board of Public Safety in regard to access to documents and information, or would it be different?
In theory, it should be the same because it should be anything that the public Board of Public Safety sees should be available to the public at large.
Were you going to say something, Henry?
No, he answered the question. No, I'm not going to say anything. I don't have anything to say at this point.
Okay. Jordan, are there other questions that, I just want to make sure that the folks listening in have an opportunity to have their questions raised.
Yeah. Tracy asked, what other cities, communities have used this formula? I know you mentioned Indianapolis, and she says, what are the results? Is there any information or data available about how effective these review boards have been?
There's no data. It's mostly anecdotal information. From everything that I've seen, the Indianapolis model seems to work fairly well in Indianapolis. People seem to have bought into it. Columbus, Indiana also has a somewhat similar board, and to be honest, I can find no information other than just their general outline of what they expect to do, but I haven't found any evidence of them having meetings or doing anything other than saying we have a board.
You can research the different types of models depending on where you are in the country. There are, as I mentioned in the beginning, about 100 cities that have some type of a citizen review board in place. Chicago has one in place. So, depending on what the state restrictions are, they're probably going to look slightly different. And depending on what their own transparency levels are, that will determine what you'll be able to find online. But there are a number of these set up around the country.
Yeah, no, there's some form of a citizens review board, a complaint board in cities ranging from Minneapolis to Pittsburgh to Berkeley, California, Miami, Florida, Cincinnati, Knoxville, Tennessee, Chicago, as Laurie said. So yeah, there's a wide range of cities, both large and small, that have instituted some form of police oversight for their local communities.
Unfortunately, Indiana is one of the most restrictive states in the country as far as giving any kind of authority whatsoever to a civilian review board. That's something that people should be working on with their state legislators. So what the council members have proposed here is about as far as I think we can legally go in Indiana under the current laws.
Okay, Nikisha asked, what if any work could be done to change the state law? Is that even feasible as an option?
It's always an option. And it's always an option for citizens and also residents and voters to speak with their state legislators about how the law can be changed. Look, this process is about all of us. It's just not, the councilman or the councilwoman or the attorney or the mayor's office. This is about all of us. And this is about opening the process up to everyone that it impacts. So when a person talks about changing state law, we need members of the public to become soldiers and demanding that things change downstate, and they changed quickly. Now, what I would say about downstate is that there is a super majority down there with Republicans versus Democrats, and Indiana being a deep red state or bright red state, or however you want to describe that, we do know that there are conservative values that are there. And at the end of the day, they love their police officers. And that's just how that works out. So I'm not saying that it's a non-starter. Believe me, I will work and I will even design legislation here locally, a resolution to ask for the start of the conversation about changing state law. but we have to know what we're up against as well. And so, yeah, sure, that can definitely happen, but it just doesn't happen with Lori, Henry, Karen, and Bob. It happens with the community and making sure that these changes can and will be made.
Well, Henry, the other thing that's really important that we emphasize is that Indiana is less of a red state than it is a grossly gerrymandered state. And I know that this is not a really sexy topic, and most people don't get involved on that level of the conversation. But until we can undo the unjust gerrymandering that has taken place in Indiana, even though I don't believe there's a majority of Republican voters, we will maintain a supermajority downstate. So we have to start dealing with the gerrymandering problem in this state if we're ever going to make a change.
Okay, questions have been raised about whether or not this board would have any oversight over the prosecutor's office. So there's concerns about the relationship between the South Bend Police and the prosecutor's office.
This board would have nothing whatsoever to do with that relationship. That is something that is inherently somewhat of a conflict between the prosecutor's office and the police department, because they work together continuously on criminal matters, and then the prosecutors has a duty to investigate police officers themselves when there's a violation of the law by the police officer. But unfortunately, that's all controlled by, again, state law, and there's nothing that a city council can do to change that.
Can you just say more? What is that relationship through state law between the prosecutor and the police?
Well, the prosecutor obviously relies on police officers whenever they do a prosecution. They work hand in glove together to get a conviction. Unfortunately, those same two entities are opposed to each other when it's a police officer who is charged with a crime, or at least an allegation is raised. And inherently, there's some distrust between members of the public and the prosecutor's office and the police department, because they do work together on so many things, but then you expect the prosecutor's office to go after one of their chief witnesses in a criminal violation of the police officer. It's somewhat inherent in the system.
Right. Is this one of the reasons that our prosecutor so quickly called in a special prosecutor in the Eric Logan case? Do you believe?
I don't believe that that's what that is. We have to be very clear about this and honest. We are in the political atmosphere, and people want to be reelected into office. So most people are not going to rock the boat so much that they polarize the issue or the community, and they know that when re-election occurs, that they won't get re-elected. I think that Cotter, in my opinion, now this is my opinion, called in a special prosecutor because of the relationship that he has with the community and the police department. So he didn't want to probably put himself in a position where he could no longer work with them. And also to, show that there was nothing underhanded going on either. So there's some things there that, I think that it's very surface and it's very clear. A lot of this is, or some of this, not a lot of it, but some of it is strictly political.
So it's important to remember that is an elected position.
Yes, it is.
So there's questions about the training. Tracy also asked, could there be a connection made with close cities like Chicago, follow their process, group training, points, stats, etc.? Could we be looking, like what would the relationship between, what could relationship there be between this body and another body in Chicago, and how can they share information? And that was a question I kind of had personally, because as I read the bill, I saw where there was required like 12 hours, I believe, of training or something for the members to ride around with officers, but there was nothing really around like cultural competency or how to identify misconduct.
Well, that's a part of the process, Jordan, and I'm glad you brought that up. When we begin our community discussions, those are a part of the process. Those are the questions that need to be a part of the process. This is not a done deal, but it's a first step, and Bob talked about that. So the community needs to weigh in on what they think is a little bit more appropriate or not. And so that is a great conversation. Now, the state law in Illinois is a bit different than it is in Indiana. So we have to make sure that we're very clear that we can't do everything they do in Illinois. And so, but what can we do to help improve our process here that they do in Illinois? And so those are the discussions that we need to have with the entire community to make sure that everybody's comfortable when this thing goes up for a vote.
Great.
Pardon?
Yes.
Just to comment on that, on page 2, under section, well, most people don't have it anyway, so it's.
Could you read it for us?
Sure, yeah. It says the 2 non-voting police members of the board shall have been members of the force for more than 7 years, have participated in ethics training, have strong community relations experience, and be of the rank of sergeant or below in rank, preferably a patrolman. So it does have ethics training. I guess it doesn't address specifically what was mentioned, but it does put some requirements on a non-voting member from the police force.
But just related to that, would this board as proposed pass? Would they have the authority not to enact punishment or discipline, but at least to make a recommendation to the police chief or to the common council or mayor or whoever for disciplinary action on a recommendation basis?
Yeah, under this proposal, yes, it would. And if the recommendation is not followed by the police department, or the police chief, or the Board of Public Safety, it also requires whoever does the discipline to give that explanation in writing of why they came to that disciplinary result that they did.
And so in that way, providing, again, more transparency.
Correct.
Putting them in a place where they have to explain to the public the decisions they're making.
Correct.
Great.
Okay. Hey, Daryl, man, we got a good number of questions here.
Okay.
Can any of you say anything about the ethics training, what that might look like? I know we're like really early in the process, but.
Who's going to have that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an elected official, but I would certainly expect ethics training to include cultural competency, because that's what we need to foster trust among the community and the police department. Ethics is kind of a broad concept that you can read into it almost anything you want to. And going back to the question about doing things with Chicago, for instance, there would be nothing to stop this civilian review board from going through the exact same type of training on ethics or cultural competency as the Chicago board does.
Okay, and let me add another layer there too. And this is just, past practice. A lot of those things are instituted at a higher level and voted in when we do contract negotiations, which is usually during the summertime. And so a lot of those things are spelled out during the course of negotiations. So you're talking about a negotiation that lasts maybe a couple months, maybe. That process involves that discussion and what that looks like. So we do have and have had in the past. I don't know if we do it anymore because I just got back on. I'm talking about to the council. Council members serve on there to ensure that these things are a part of the negotiations for contracts. And so that we do understand that the programs are there, they're fully funded, or we're going through human resources to make sure that those programs are being properly instituted and implemented as well. Did I answer your question?
I saw a question just come up about whether the negotiations are done in public. No, they are not.
No.
No. Council members do participate. There's usually a committee of council members who are involved in the negotiations, but it's not open to the public.
Do you have other questions, Jordan?
Yeah, Lee asked, could we become a part of the National Alliance with the Chicago Alliance? It's a group that was behind the Chicago proposed ordinance.
Never heard of it.
Neither.
Yeah, we I don't know if you remember, Henry, when we were in Chicago a while ago, your sister had a big hosted a big conference at their union hall, and that organization talked about its work around citizen review boards and shared some literature and information.
And they set up a national organization, okay, precisely focusing on issues like this, like what we had last summer, okay? And actually, they're kind of critical of their own, I guess what you'd call complaint board, and they want to go to a straight, which they can do under Illinois law, a straight review board. And they're probably, you know, the most active in the country around that.
What is the National Alliance called?
It's the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. I'll try to get you a URL for it. Here, I'll look one up.
Yeah, Eric Kell asked if Mayor Mueller, if he got his, if he got the study back on creating a board. He had mentioned a study, I guess, at some point.
I would bet that the coronavirus has pushed all of that back also. There's been no mention to us anyway.
Great. And so I'm just going to toss one more in while Jordan gets the next question. And is there any way that, and again, I know this is preliminary at the moment, but for this proposal, how would it work or interact or utilize the police discipline matrix? Would that be part of how it made determinations on cases that it wanted to bring forth or investigate?
You have to ask that question one more time.
Yeah, how would the proposal for this police disciplinary matrix, is there a sense of how our Citizens Police Complaint Board would use the police disciplinary matrix in terms of either bringing cases or furthering investigations or making recommendations for disciplinary actions?
Well, it will only make sense that we, where the board itself uses those metrics if they're adopted by the Board of Public Safety. I don't think that it would be smart business or good business to do anything obtuse or apart from that. Obviously, those metrics are there for them to discipline at a different level that they have in the past. But we don't have a new set of metrics anyway, so we don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. But as we're, walking down the street with this particular bill, and there's metrics that are going to be adopted, I holistically believe that will be a part of the conversation. I don't see that not being a part of the discussion or decision-making process.
I would also hope that it gives some weight to some of the amendments that have been pushed forward to the matrix, what has been proposed. I know there are a lot of people that are not comfortable with some of the items that are still remaining in some of the sections of the matrix. And the review board may be able to bring to light why some of those unacceptable conduct items should no longer remain as acceptable on that matrix.
Great. Thank you. And Jordan, I just want to point out, it's 8:32. Do we have more questions from our listeners that you want to make sure that get responded to before we wind down?
Yeah, so just two more questions here about community participation. One came from Laquita. She asked, how can citizens get involved and participate and influence the process? And Connor asked, he raised concerns about that our community also consists of a large number of Latinos who are disproportionately incarcerated. So how do we make sure that we're involving our Latino brothers and sisters in this conversation?
Okay, can you repeat that question again? I got the one with Ms. Hughes. And so she becomes a part of the process as she is right now. While we're having these community meetings, obviously right now it's virtual, but hopefully in the future will be, face-to-face. And also, if you want to be a citizen member on that board, you apply to become a part of that board in this process. Now, as far as the Latino influence, I didn't get all of that question.
Yeah, so the question is, how do we involve our Latino community in this conversation?
We're involving them now. I think that the Latino community needs to come on board as we are going through these processes. I think that the process right now is as wide open as it can be throughout the world. Anybody can log in and listen to what we're talking about. I don't know if there is anything special that person is asking for, and that person is asking for something special. Please let us know. Let me know. I don't know what that is. But as of right now, all of what we do is public. If you're a part of the public, if you're a resident here in South Bend, you are included, and don't feel like that you're not included.
We can also do special outreach, which I think is something that would be recommended regardless of the ethnicity of the community, because I'm looking, there are 24 people participating right now. We would hope to have a whole lot more of the citizens of the community, Black, white, Latino, involved and concerned about the conditions that we're experiencing in the community. The first thing we would want them to do is partake in that 30-day open response and comment period, so that we can make this ordinance as acceptable to the residents of South Bend as we can. If there are modifications that people feel need to be made during that 30-day comment period, would be the best time to do that. But we can reach out in whatever form. If people have suggestions, you can reach out to me or reach out to Henry. If people think that things need to be perhaps written in other languages so that we can reach other communities, we're open to doing any of that.
So we've had between 25 to 30 people on Facebook, and there are some folks like Isaac Flores. I know him; he's been tuned in. Eli Cantu, Noelia Rodriguez. So I think there's some people who we can reach out to within the community who are concerned about this issue and will be willing to offer advice as to how we can do better outreach.
Excellent.
And I just want to follow up with another question, because part of the proposal, as I'm reading it, and I'll read it, the complaint process should be accessible to all citizens, regardless of race, national origin, ancestry, religion, color, sex, or sexual orientation, gender identity, age, language, disability, or United States military service veteran status. My question is, would this also be available regardless of citizenship status or documentation status?
I would think absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Non-citizens or immigrants, whatever you want to call people, they're people, and they're aggrieved by the same actions as anyone else's.
Hi. Good evening, you guys. This is Kat. I was just wondering, had there been any mentionings of the CP21 consulting firm that was here? I think that with their report, all things considered, you know, would be very much valid to how they felt like the police structure, you know, is now, and what kind of accountability methods that they impose. Is there anything on that?
CP21. I'm not familiar with CP21.
I'm not sure that report's been made public to the council or anyone else. I'm not even sure the report's been completed yet. Obviously, when the report is completed and reviewed by the citizens and the council, if there's something good that can be taken from it, and I assume there will be, and put into this ordinance, that would be a great amendment to the ordinance.
One of the
Thank
things,
you.
just to go back, this is Nikisha, happy to sit in on this conversation. One of the things, to go back to the question about involving Latinx people, will there be translation at these meetings? I mean, I think it's one thing to say that people can come and participate and for it to be open, and I think that that's awesome. But is the ordinance written in Spanish right now?
That's what I was saying. We can do that.
Yeah. And would there be simultaneous or some kind of translation at these meetings, or Spanish language only meetings, or, you know, partnering with different organizations? So, you know, I think, yeah, special outreach makes a lot of sense, and taking those kinds of steps would hopefully help.
Well, some of those things are already done. Like if you come to our council meetings, in the past, we've had a Spanish language agenda versus an English printed an agenda. So there are things that are there that we do recognize that everyone does not speak English. Again, we'll make it as comfortable as we can for everyone in this community. I don't think anyone should feel excluded. I think that that's a great idea, that we do have somebody there that can translate if that needs to happen. But absolutely, those things should happen and will happen to make sure that everybody's comfortable while we're going through this process.
Yeah, also when we speaking on language barriers,
Yes.
also a sign language interpreter would be great as well for the people that are non-hearing as well. Taking them things into consideration as well. Thank you.
And just while we're on the topic, this is Igor. The Black Lives Matter South Bend Network has access to interpreters that can do direct translation. Our only limitation is more technical, having access to some of the earpiece equipment that allows it to be really effective. But those resources are out there. When the time comes, Black Lives Matter South Bend is happy to step up there.
Thank you.
Great, and I don't want to circumvent any additional questions, but Jordan, how are we doing?
Just folks are stressing. They want to hear a little bit more about what the successes have been in Indianapolis. I think some folks got on a little late, so they didn't hear that initially. Attorney Palmer, I apologize.
That's fine. There's, as I said earlier, most of the information is anecdotal. I'm not aware of any studies, but everything that I have read leads me to believe that it has accomplished the purpose of increasing the trust and the transparency between the community and the police department. And you know, I don't see how any type of ordinance like this could not help. We shouldn't let perfection get in the way of progress. And we've made the first step. We're willing to work on it to make it as good as possible. But we have to jump into it and get it going.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I saw a question come up about a hate crime bill in Indiana. That's correct. We don't have one.
Right, we're one of 5 states in the
Yes.
country that does not.
Yes.
That's back to gerrymandering. Just want to point that out.
And just one last time, Bob, because I don't want Paul to be upset with me here on Facebook. Can you just speak a little bit more about the investigatory powers of this board? Because
Sure.
he's particularly concerned about cover-ups, alleged cover-ups. So yeah, can you speak to that?
Sure. This board would have the right to subpoena witnesses and documents, put them under oath, whether it's, civilian witnesses, police witnesses, whatever. And this board would be able to inquire into anything that does not violate someone's constitutional rights. For instance, if you had a police officer who's being charged with a crime and you're looking to handle disciplinary measures through this board, you can't ask the police officer to admit that he committed a crime. But you can go through, you can subpoena witnesses, you can subpoena documents. Again, there are some documents that may be confidential by state law that you would have to get a court order to see, even through a subpoena. But the subpoena power is probably the most important thing to avoid any kind of cover-up.
And you would need 2/3 of a vote, right? 2/3 of the vote in order for that to be initiated?
I believe that is what it says, yes.
And
But again, remember that every voting member is being appointed by the Common Council.
so,
Well, that's all that I have, Daryl.
yeah, well, just a quick question that just came up from Brad Laird. Would that subpoena power apply to being able to subpoena police officers?
Yes.
Great. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up now. I want to thank everyone for participating, and I want to thank particularly Councilman Davis and Councilwoman Hammond and you, Bob, as well, for participating, but also for bringing this important conversation before the community so that we can advance this conversation and strengthen the relationship and deepen the trust with the police department here in South Bend, and ensure that justice really does apply to everyone equally. Again, thank you. We'll be following up. We'll have the next town hall a week from today, next week, Thursday at 7:30. Please tune in. The topic for that town hall will be looking at deeper the school referendum that's on our June ballot. So please join us for that. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.